Hello, good evening, and welcome everybody. Welcome to the Zoom room, and welcome to all of you who are following us on the different social networks. It is my great pleasure today to be welcoming you to a series of talks organized by the UK Mexican Art Society and UNAM United Kingdom with Dr. Angelica Baena, who is a very good friend of ours and very knowledgeable about Mesoamerican art and culture. And it is a pleasure to have you again with us, Angelica. I will tell our audience a little bit about yourself, and then the floor will be yours. Angelica studied her PhD in Mesoamerican Studies at the National Autonomous University of Mexico, where she specialized in Mesoamerican iconography. She also taught at the Faculty of Higher Studies in Acatlán, in UNAM, and she has published many articles regarding pre-Hispanic codices and Mexica religion. She has also published articles in many different countries and attended academic meetings in Mexico, Peru, Argentina, Spain, England, and Poland. This is part of a commemoration of 500 years after the fall of Tenochtitlan, and we are heading in that direction by commemorating Mesoamerican art and culture, recognizing all its merits and its complexity through a series of talks that will be once a month with Angelica, and later on we will be inviting you to others from other collaborators from UNAM. On this occasion, well, I would also like to invite you to some videos, to watch some videos that Angelica has prepared for the UK Mexican Art Society, which you can see on their website, on very specific topics. And they are a preparation for these longer and very anticipated talks. Angelica, I welcome you in name of UNAM-UK and the UK Mexican Art Society. Thank you for accepting our invitation, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Annalena. Thank you very much to everyone that joined us today. I'm going to share my screen. Yep, it's okay. So first of all, I want to thank UNAM United Kingdom for this opportunity, and also I want to thank so much Javier Calderon, the director of the UK Mexican Art Society. We have been working together in a project that aim to promote Mesoamerican cultures and Mesoamerican arts in the United Kingdom, and we are doing that using platforms such as YouTube to generate introductory videos to all the family to encourage interest in these topics. Today, I'm going to talk about the Mesoamerican arts. It will be an introduction about what is Mesoamerica, what has been considered art, how the objects that we call art nowadays pass a process in the eyes of the Western societies, and they went from hidden objects to objects of art, and some examples about these objects, these technologies, based on their cosmogonies or worldview that we could find in the sources of information, written sources for information that we have from the 16th century. So first of all, I would like to talk about what is Mesoamerica. And what is Mesoamerica? It's very important because Mesoamerica is a concept that helps the specialists to understand a geographical area that has cultural traits that are shaped by different groups with different languages and different cultural characteristics. Anyway, Paul Kirchhoff decides to explore this area, given them the name of Mesoamerica in 1943, and focus on these cultural traits. Some of the cultural traits more important are the consume of corn or maize, and also beans, squashes, and chilies. The corn was known in different parts of the American continent, for instance, in South America, but in Mesoamerica, it's very important because it's part of the mythology and the cosmovision of the people. It includes like veneration of deities that are related to the corn. A lot of the ideas that, or the cultural traits of this area that was called Mesoamerica by Paul Kirchhoff were shared or exchanged based on traits. The people from different cultures and different backgrounds exchange goods, and also they talk. And by talking, they share their points of view about the universe, about the nature, and that's the way a system of beliefs in the area was created. And the examples of these cultural traits are so many. To mention some, I could say in architecture we have, for instance, the step pyramids that are spread in the area, in the Mesoamerican area. Also the use of some objects as goods that were very, very valuable, for instance, the obsidian, or for instance, the greenstones, that they were very important. And also we have like some cultural practices. To mention one, I could say the ball game that was spread almost in all the area. Obviously, the concept of Mesoamerica, because it's an academic concept, is useful, but also it has to be questioned nowadays, because the archaeological advance and the archaeological research proves that some of the original traits that Kirchhoff mentioned are not in all the area. Some of them were not included. And obviously with the research, the current research, we know that the area was not as he stated. It implicates more places and is more dynamic. The interaction between groups is more dynamic. Even though that problematic situation, the concept of Mesoamerica is still useful to understand this geographical area. So where is the geographical area that I'm talking about? Well, it implicates it include the majority of Mexico, from the north of Mexico, the west of Mexico, the center of Mexico, the Gulf, the Maya area, Central America, Oaxaca, and Guerrero. Each region has different development, different cultures or civilizations that were there, and as well the development of the areas depends on the period. Not all the periods are exactly the same in all the Mesoamerica. Each individual area has a different development. And the chronology of Mesoamerica is also as well debatable. There are differences in the areas. Not all of them are considered exactly in the same way. Like some archaeologists use specific chronologies, in particular archaeological sites, but it's accepted the idea of a periodization or a chronology that includes three main periods. That will be the pre-classic period or formative, the classic, and the post-classic, also with subdivisions. Sometimes you see the special bibliography or the research. It could vary between 50, 100 years, depending on the author. But in the majority of the researchers agree on this division or use it, implicating more or less these years that are here, no? Like David Carrasco shows in this chronology. Considering that now we know that we're talking about this specific area that is Mesoamerica, that involves Mexico and Central America, now I'm going to introduce you to the discussions about Mesoamerican art. So first of all, I would like to see that, or I would like to go with you to this journey of concepts where the objects pass different stages until they have been considered art for the Westernized. This is from the Western perspective because arts is a Western concept. So originally, the objects that were found by the first Spanish conquerors were considered majority hidden images or hidden objects. So with the invasion or with the conquest, what we could see is that different kind of speeches will be created. One of them implicates like justifying the conquest. So try to find a cause that make more legitimate the idea of go to this territory and take it and invade it. So here we have, for instance, the Codices Catitlan, where it shows the Spanish and its Indian allies developing this war of conquest in the territory, and here we have Hernán Cortés. So the myths about the conquest and about the objects that the Spanish were founding during their explorations will begin. So the first myth that we will find is that the conquest was made by the Spanish as the protagonist, and the Indian allies are like in a secondary plane based on what the Spanish folk or the Spanish said in their chronics. And also we will have the problem with the objects that they found. So when they obviously was a new world, there were things that for them were marvelous and they really admire. For instance, they admire the architecture. They really said that it was admirable, the organization of the market of Tlatelolco, for instance, but they will have the problem of these objects, how to classify these objects that portrayed these figures of snakes or these figures of creatures that they couldn't really find pleasant to look at. So is at this point when the majority of these objects will be considered hidden images or hidden objects, and it will be part of the justification of the Spanish conquest. What they will say is that they are really fighting against the devil because the devil is present in that new land, and therefore they have a very important mission to destroy the devil and to spread the Catholic and true religion. So here we have an image from the Historia of the Tlaxcala that represents the first 12 friars, Franciscan friars, and they erect the cross that will destroy all these evil presence, spirits based on the Spanish point of view at that time. We have to remember that at that time, they really believed that it was the presence of the devil. The devil was something real to them. Therefore, it was very important to destroy it from their Christian perspective, and still with some elements of medieval thought. So that is very, very important to remember. And obviously, in order to achieve that, they have to justify this fight against the devil. And that's the reason we see in a lot of the chronists the idea of the repetition of the term sacrifice. And the sacrifice was used as propaganda against the native beliefs and objects. And we have, for instance, here the image of the Zompantli in the Códice Durán, or image of the human sacrifice in the Códice Magliabechi. This sacrifice is very interesting and it's very important because we know obviously the physics anthropologists have found evidence of bones and skulls and evidence that people were murdered or were killed or were sacrificed, but never it has been found in the numbers that the Spanish chronics present. So recently there is a discussion about if it's important to carry on using the term sacrifice. Sacrifice from the perspective of Hoover and Mouse means to make something sacred, and to make something sacred by the destruction of that object. So in that way, it could be justified the use of the term sacrifice, because these persons could be part of an offering to the gods, and that offering has to be destroyed. But where I agree with the recent researchers about this topic of the sacrifice, for instance, Martin Jansen, is that sacrifice has been used as a pejorative term to condemn completely all the Native American practices. So in a process of decolonization, maybe will be important, interesting to find a term that is not such ideological or political. So I understand that, and I'm waiting for a new proposal of that. In between, I still use the term sacrifice, but just to say that it was a practice of offer human beings to the gods, but not in the magnitude or with the impact or with the numbers that the Spanish originally said. As also, I'm not condemning the Spanish to say that is part of a war of propaganda that obviously goes with a war of conquest. So we have obviously different approaches to the objects, and from after the conquest, we will see that part of the approach was the destruction of the objects, taking into account that they were considered very dangerous. So we have, for instance, the example of Diego Duran, that in 1562, in the city of Mani, Yucatan, decided to destroy a lot of codices and a lot of objects that were very, very important for the Native American Mayas religion. And also we have here a representation in the Historia of Tlaxcala of the destruction of objects that were considered hidden images by the friars. So it's very interesting to mention this, because even though the Spanish destroyed a lot of the objects because they consider them problematic or dangerous, also they decide for, in order to evangelize and in order to convert the Indians, they decide also to register the stories, and they make different interviews and they try to understand what that object means. So the basic motivation of that, as I mentioned, it was to convert the people, because if they didn't understand their beliefs, it will be impossible to convince them to believe in Jesus and believe in the true religion according to the Spanish point of view. So thanks to that recollection of beliefs and that information that they provide us to the friars and the conquerors, is that we know part of the story of the beliefs of the Native American people from these regions, no? The Mexica, the Mayas, and other Mixtecs, etc. So that's it, no? What happened? So after this, what happened with some objects? Not all the objects were destroyed. It's important that some of them, they were considered also curiosities. And by that term of curiosities, what I mean is that they were considered very exotic objects that were quite attractive in some way, were as well very mysterious, and therefore they were sent to Spain and to Europe in general to be appreciated and to be seen. So we have, for instance, here the painter Alberto Durero, that saw some of these objects when the objects that they were sent to the Spanish king, and he could see them in Brussels, and he was amazed of the objects. He liked them. In some ways, it was for them wonderful, mysterious, and they were prodigies. So it was like a valoration of the objects as an exotic good that is interesting to observe. And some of the objects also, they were sent to Europe because they have an economical value. They were made of gold or they were made in silver, therefore they could be melted, and the value will be the economical value of the metals, no? Some of the objects also, they finish spread hand to hand to different members of the nobility or European nobility pass it. Some persons that were curious, and what happened is that they finish in cabinet of curiosities. At that point, from the 16th century, will it be a manifestation or an interest of collection, create private collections of different objects from different cultures, and showed to people that were important, amuse them with the objects, and collect different kind of things, including figurines, including bones of animals, including paintings, all kind of things that could be different, no? And that's the reason we have, for instance, the birth of the museums, where we can now see some of the objects. This is an example of the Ashmolean Museum, and originally the Ashmolean Museum it was formed from the collection of Elias Ashmole, and he has his cabinet of curiosities, of different curiosities that he collects, and then they were donated, and then it was created the Ashmolean Museum. So this is just one example of how some of the objects finish in Europe, and they are now in these places. And with that situation also will be a new category for these objects. So they will be anymore the hidden objects. So then is when we begin to use, or the problem of the word of art, the terminology of art will be introduced. But it will be quite slowly, because it was originally not accepted as art. During the 18th century, the idea of art was that the art was a manifestation of beauty, taste, and grace, but based on the Greco-Latin canon. So everything that looks Greek or looks Roman and has that representation of the body, the harmony, and the proportion could be considered art in the eyes of Winkelmann and the critics of the time. So the objects of Mesoamerica don't work. They didn't belong to that category based on that judge. But then with Kant and Hegel and this idea of aesthetic is interesting, because the idea will be that you could be able to appreciate different aesthetic, different manifestations of the human spirit in objects. And even Friedrich Hegel talked about some examples of this that was called primitive art, to show that it was part of the spirit of the humankind. So the category of the objects again changed in Western eyes. And by the 20th century, with all the discussion of the arts in Europe itself, also we will see the popularity of the modernism, and we will see that the objects created in Mesoamerica, they were in that case considered objects of art, different kind of art, primitive art if you wish, but art. And also they were an influence to artists of the Western cultures, modernists, such as Henry Moore. And we have here like how the influence of the Chacmol in this reclining figure in this sculpture from 1929. So then the objects of Mesoamerica now are not just hidden objects or random objects, they are considered objects of art. And then Also, they will influence the Mexican artists after the revolution, and with this need of creating a nationalistic speech that could join the society together, artists such as Siqueiros or Diego Rivera, that we're seeing here a painting of Diego Rivera, they use Mesoamerican figures, Mesoamerican iconography to create a nationalistic speech. And obviously the discussion was not if it was art or not, it was more about how the Mesoamerican artists have the appreciation of that objects. And the research has been very rich. We have different researchers with different approach. Here I just show Edmundo Gorman, a Mexican researcher that saw like the art of the monstrosity, so the art that could generate like a feeling of amazement or wonder in the viewer. We have Erwin Panofsky that gave us like the methodology to approach it, like from the formal point of view of the materials and the techniques, but also try to understand the topic and do an iconographic study. We have Kubler, Beatriz de la Fuente, that saw the art, the Mesoamerican art, as a very important form of communication. And we have also here, I have in the image Esther Pastori, that she is very critical of the impact of the Western eye in the studies of art. And we have many others. We have as well studies, not just from the history of art, the Mesoamerican objects has been studied from an archaeological perspective and also an anthropological perspective that tries to understand them as more as a ritual objects and technologies of communication between the humans and the gods. So just to mention some cases of some researchers. And well, today what I would like to explain is some the manifestations of this, what we call art, from the cosmogony, worldview of cosmovision of the people that created. Obviously, as I have explained before, it is difficult because all the sources of information, or the majority of sources of information, apart from the objects themselves, they have an Spanish input that sometimes explain us more about the interest of the persons that collect the sources, or the new ideas that the new converts to Christianity, the new native converts to Christianity, they want to show. But even though we have some myths and some elements that could help us to have an idea of maybe what they thought about some topics that are considered part of the art today. So for instance, I would like to talk about the idea that they have of the origin of music and dance. I would like to talk about this music and dance from the perspective of the Nahuas. And that has been recollected by Fray Jerónimo de Mendieta in Historia Eclesiástica Indiana. And he, in a really short phrases, explain us why the music was important, or how the music come to earth. So originally, when the songs were destroyed, the gods create the fifth song. They create the fifth song by self-sacrifice, and after the fifth song were created, the boat or a person that was a priest of Tezcatlipoca, that we can recognize here because he has his smoking mirrors. Actually, here I introduced some smoke. Tezcatlipoca talked to this priest, or this person that was very devout to him, and asked him to go to the house of the sun to recover the objects. So how this devout of Tezcatlipoca could achieve that target based on that myth? Well, he was asked to call some creatures, particularly a turtle, and use also as well a whale. And the reason to use these animals was to create a bridge from the coast to the house of the sun. So this devote of Tezcatlipoca went to the house of the sun, and the sun was very, very worried about it and said to the musicians, please don't reply to that person, ignore him. But the devote of Tezcatlipoca knew the sacred chants and instigate them to dance. And when the musicians and they were in the house of the sun and they reply the chant of the priest of Tezcatlipoca, they were taken from the house of the sun to earth. So that is like the myth, and the myth also explain that this music that was now taken to earth again will be used for ceremonies, for important ceremonies and festivities, and it will be very, very spread and for that purposes. And also we know that the music was important in the war, because that's the reason they create these drums. These drums were used, as we can see in this image of the Florentine Codex. They were used together. We have here the drum, and we have here the teponaztli. And the teponaztli and the huehuetl were musical instruments. In this huehuetl of Malinalco, we also have the symbol of the sun fourth movement, or the fifth sun, accompanied by the iconographical elements that represent warriors. And here we have a teponaztli of a creature that is a canid, possible a coyote. So the music was considered sacred and was considered like product of this travel of the Tezcatlipoca's priest to the house of the sun. And also we see, for instance, that the chants, the music, particularly the singing, speaking beautifully, and knowing sacred words were very important for the Mixtecs. Here we have the Codex Vindobonensis, that is a document that gives us all the information about the Mixtec beliefs in pre-Hispanic times, and it's a pre-Hispanic document, so it doesn't have influence of the Spanish. And it's important to say that it's considered that originally in the heaven, we can see here the stars. They were these two characters that are very interesting because they are painted in black. That is a color that is associated with priesthood, and it's a sacred color also. And everything begins with a person singing or talking, and a person giving offerings. And there, from that moment, from the moment of the offerings and the sacred word, we have the beginning of the night, and also we have here the association with the days, that are the days. So the word, the singing are important, and as we saw, the music was considered sacred and of divine origin. We have as well here the idea of writing and painting. So writing and painting was also something considered sacred, and we can know a little bit more about the worldview of in this case, the Mixtecs, exploring these codices, or these ancient books. And we have here originally the birth of 9 winds. He is being born from a knife. And this 9 wind is known in other cultures as Quetzalcoatl, of the feather serpent. And in this codex, we have different titles. There are different titles that he holds before he descends to earth with the elements of power and government. So one of the titles that Quetzalcoatl, or 9 winds in Mixtec, has is that he is a painter, a writer. So that is very important, because writing and painting and producing these this kind of documents was considered quite equivalent, was not a distinction between writing and painting, is the same kind of thing. And was Nine or Quetzalcoatl the one that provides that knowledge to the mystics based on this codex. And also in checking the Nahua documents or the Nahua codices, we have the codices Borbonicus, where we know as well that is Quetzalcoatl involved in the with his duality, and he is involved in bringing knowledge to the first humans, that in this version is Oshomoko and Zipactonal, and Zipactonal appears like a male. Normally in other sources appears like the woman, but here is different. But the important thing is that they have the grains where they will be using for divinatory purposes, and also they have all elements to communicate with the gods, like the pisitil or to burn tobacco, and also this bone to do piercing, and the back of the priest. So they have all the elements. And Quetzalcoatl also will be considered the god that will be associated with Intlili, Intlapali, or what is in Nahuatl the black and the red, or the color, that is considered the knowledge, that is considered all the, well, the knowledge, the arts, all the manifestation of wisdom, and also like the beauty.
Sorry, Angelica, could you please try to enlarge your picture?
It's not large. Okay, sorry. I didn't know. We have also here the materials, and the materials are very, very important, and also they have these ideas from the Cosmovision on the worldview, and we can see some examples of it. For instance, we know, thanks to these sources of information, we know that the greenstones were considered like associated with fertility, with water, and with life. And it's very interesting that to present an object that means life, that is a heart, they use this element or this material. So the material sometimes is associated also with the meaning, and it's a way to make a redundancy of what they are talking about, or what they want to communicate. Also, it's interesting the mask. We have the skull mask from the Templo Mayor, associated with the god Mictlantecutli, the god of death, and the material that was chosen to use them, the main material apart from the knife and the pyrite to make the eyes, is a skull. So it's a way to give you more and more and more meaning and reiterate what they are trying to say. And we have here also the knives, like these personified knives that represent Quetzalcoatl. As we can see here, we have the elements of Quetzalcoatl, and the knives are dressed, or they are wearing, or they're personified in a miniature way, the god. And it's interesting because also we can see that for example, in the mystics, as I mentioned, it's supposed that Quetzalcoatl or Nine was born from a knife. So the idea of the association was quite evident to them. And we have also as well the idea that the objects themselves were alive, or they were like beings that could be activated and deactivated by ritual activities. For instance, here, this image from the Codex Borgia, plate 52, represents a deer, and the deer has all the calendral signs, or the signs of the day, and he is presented like a living thing. And what is really representing is the skin where the codex is made where the skin is made of. So this is interesting because the materials, some of the materials were considered very important to make a redundancy of the meaning, but also they were considered like that they will give like some kind of power or some kind of energy to the object, or to what they are representing. And we have also, based on the myths, we have the idea that some of the objects will be alive. And there some examples that we have is the one that provide the Popol Vuh in the case of to understand the Quiche Maya people. And in the Popol Vuh is mentioned that the gods made different kind of humanities from different materials. The last material that they use, and the one that is made the Maya man, was the maize of the corn. But before, they were different creatures. First the animals, then the men made of moth, and as well they create a creature that was carved wood. And these persons or these creatures made by wood, they were not very good to worship the gods, and they really upset them. So at the end, they were destroyed, and the persons or the creatures that will be in the destruction or will interfere in the destruction of these humans from wood will be the pots, and will be all the objects, the grinding stones, the objects that persons use commonly. So they were considered in some ways objects that could be animated, and they could in some circumstance attack. For instance, in this myths of the creation and the destruction of different kind of humanities previous the humans made of corn. That's the reason of part of the explanation that some objects in the Maya area are have a perforation, or they are called vasijas matadas, or objects that have been killed with the purpose of deactivate their power. But also they were deactivated, these objects, so they have a perforation or a hole on it, when you want to deactivate or stop the cycle of life of the things. So when an object won't be used anymore, it could be deactivated in that way. Or if it's the ending of a cycle of 52 years, the objects have to be destroyed and they have to be deactivated. And there are different explanations for this. And also sometimes they are associated with burials, and they are deactivated because they won't be used in this life, maybe in the afterlife, but not in this one. And this process in the Mesoamerican arts of using the objects and choose the materials based on their meaning, or kill or destroy the object to deactivate its power, also is accompanied by other two circumstances or other two practices that are the recycling or the intentional destruction of the image. So that could be for different purpose. This is an example. We don't have here written sources that will tell us more about the ideas of the people that created these objects. This one is a figurine from Chala, from Teotihuacan, that was smashed to pieces. And it could be with the destruction of, could be related with the destruction of the city maybe, or it could be even with related to the end of a cycle. And also we have here the head number 2 of San Lorenzo that shows the recycling of materials. So some materials were used as in different occasions. You could make thrones, or you can make heads in the case of the Olmecs, so you could make different objects. So you can reutilize the things, but first of all, you have to deactivate the things to be able to use them again. Sorry. And what about the artist? In the Western world, it's very important, the figure of an artist. It's something that is very, very, it's like the base, no? In some ways. Even Gombrich says that the art is like the life of the artist, or what the artists are. So in this case, what happened in Mesoamerica, apart from the Mayas, in reality, we don't know so much about the individual persons that create these objects. But we know that in the Maya area, particularly in the late Classic, it was quite common that the artists signed their work. So thanks to the development of the epigraphic studies, the specialists in that area have been able to read the names of the artists. So for instance, we have here one that is Ag Masham, that was an important painter from Naranjo in Guatemala, and his name has been translated and found. And normally what happens is that the name of the painters are accompanied by the title. So if painter or writer, or it's painting or writing, also is like the one that is related to the sacred books, or it's other word to refer to the sculptor of this person. So this is a case that is quite different to the rest of the area. We don't have like names for the other manifestations or other objects of the other areas, but it's very interesting that the Maya that developed a very naturalistic art also. They have these artists and this importance of artists that were related obviously to the upper class or to the leaders that were funding and were portrayed and depicted in that art. And what about the viewers? Well, the viewers, we always think in the Western about the aesthetic experience that we will have when we see a work of art, or what we call a work of art. And it's very important, like the viewer share the experience or have a feeling about what he's watching. But it's very interesting that in Mesoamerica, the viewer was not just the persons that were there in the room observing, or not in the room, outside in the temple watching this, in this case, this monumental sculpture, but also they always thought about the gods that were involved, or the elements of nature that were there observing. So in this very important sculpture that well known for everyone know, Coatlicue, that has been identified as Coatlicue of the woman with the skirt of a snake. That is quite questionable also, because we just have the snake skirt, and we don't have a head. It's two snakes looking at each other, and creating like a face, but it's two in profile. And in reality, it's just like a decapitated person, because the snakes as well represent blood. But on the base of the sculpture, we have that is the representation of the god Tlaltecutli, or the god or goddess Earth, is an androgyn deity, and this deity is facing directly to the earth, to the soil. So it's very important that he is considered also a viewer. And we have the examples of viewers that are not humans and are not present in different places, in different contexts. For instance, in the Olmec, in La Venta, in the Olmec, very ancient art from the preclassic period of formative, we have this offering of La Venta. That is, it has been buried and is just for the gods to see. So Coatlicue also is this, it has this viewer that is the supernatural viewer, apart from the viewers that will be the human ones. And it's very important to please Tlaltecutli of the god of the earth, because the earth was a god, a creature that has to be sacrificed by Tezcatlipoca and Quetzalcoatl in order to create what we know as the earth. And in order, after the sacrifice, they have to pay the debt with her, and she will give all the nature, she will give the plants, and she will give all the seeds, but she has to be fed with the bloodletting and offerings and sacrifice in the sense of an offering that has to be destroyed to feed the earth. And well, this is a brief introduction to what is called Mesoamerican art, with some examples based on the cultures that we have written sources that we could more or less reconstruct what they thought. I hope that you have liked it. And this is all part of an effort that I'm doing with the UK Mexican Art Society that is directed by Javier Calderon. And he is really keen on sharing and making awareness of the Mesoamerican art. Obviously, the gallery is more specialized in contemporary art from Britain and Mexico, but is in the interest of the UK Mexican Art Society, bring awareness of the past, of the very rich past of the Mesoamerican cultures. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Angelica, for this incredible talk. I think you drew a very precise parallelism between the way in which we contemplate art in the West and how to approach these expressions that should be better known. And I would like to invite the audience to either type their questions in the chat box or to make them directly. Angelica, when you finish sharing your screen, maybe we can open up the dialogue because I know there are many congratulations right now. We have all been fascinated by the talk and by the objects that you have shown us. And through the process in history, you know, how these objects have been dispersed and recontextualized, and also the meaning has been lost and also contaminated, let us say, by numerous prejudices, by numerous things that collectors tell about themselves as well. No, a collection can reflect an idea that may have little to nothing to do with the truth. No, so these the original uses that were given to, say, musical instruments, for example, are very revealing. No? And the new things that are coming up as well regarding the possibility of identifying the artist who built that instrument, I think it's an incredible approach that turns out to be fascinating from many perspectives. No, the idea of the individual, etc.
Yeah, that's very interesting indeed. Thank you very much for your comment. And yes, thanks to the epigraphists that are working in the Maya area, is that we know all these names. And it's fascinating because also I think is related to the idea of the Mayan art, that because the Mayan art is very naturalistic, it's one of the arts that is most appreciated in the Western cultures because it portrays the kings, well, we call it the kings or the queens, in a very naturalistic way. And it's very similar to what we do in our Western culture, no? So in some ways, maybe this idea of representing the king of the government so accurately is obviously important to them, to show who was the person that created that, and they were members of the same nobility. So it's very unique and very interesting indeed.
Well, there are several questions in the chat box. Well, the first one is what we want to do throughout this year and onwards. What do you think would be some steps to move forward to increase the appreciation and awareness of Mesoamerican art?
Well, I think that obviously this giving information conference, inviting our British audience, if we have, to enjoy the marvelous museums that you have. Obviously, when I talk about this construction of the museums, I'm not condemning, it's just like the origins, but now the museums are really keen on showing all these marvelous works of art or marvelous expressions of technology, as you want to say, and they have a lot of websites, and it's a lot of availability to explore it in Mexico and in Britain. In both countries it's very possible. And also, well, we are trying in the UK Mexican Art Society to create like these short capsules with information about some artistic manifestations in the area that we think that will be interesting to everyone. But there is a lot of literature, and there is a lot of institutions, and it's just a question of getting involved. follow the museums. If you wish, follow the UK Mexican Art Society, the UNAM United Kingdom, Mexicolor. We have also different capsules made by the Instituto Nacional de Antropología e Historia, or INA. So there is a lot of information, and it's just a question of getting involved and lose yourself in that marvelous world.
Excellent. There's another question in Spanish, contrasting mural painting among the Mayas with vase painting, ¿no? La pintura mural y la pintura de vasos. Why do you think it is so different?
Well, obviously, can you read it in Spanish, please?
El arte maya, la pintura mural es muy distinta a la pintura en vasos. ¿A qué consideras que se deba esto?
Well, obviously, thank you very much. I will reply in English. Well, obviously, it's very important taking account like the materiality. As I explained, the materiality, it says a lot about the meaning of the objects, and also the space that you will have is not the same. And the mural painting responds to a specific particular architecture. So obviously, the representation of that will be based on in which part of the building is located that painting. And the ceramics, obviously, they are different styles and different styles and different intentions of doing so, but I think that the main explanation and the most simple one of the difference will be obviously the use that it will given. One is to share, to express, and you have a limited space of to create, to paint. And the mural painting, obviously you have more space, but it has been selected based on in the building, and it will be different kind of colors, different kind of topics based on the interest of the person that will do it and the building itself.
Yes, and I think you have partially answered the third question about digital culture, you know, and the way that access is going to revolutionize, or is already revolutionizing, the way in which we can approach these objects and these images like nowhere before. No? So I think that many good things might come from this. I don't know what your opinion is.
I think it's marvelous. I really appreciate the development of the digital culture, because it's a way to give access to everyone to the objects of different places, different cultures, and that will increase obviously our understanding, and the research will also advance. So thanks to, talking about the Maya ceramics, thanks to these photographs of the Kerr collection, we can see them like if they were like a mural paint. No, they are not, but we can see them in a plane that is easy for the specialists to look details that normally you will miss. Or also as well, we have the marvelous reconstructions of temples, and it's very, very important. And I think that we're very lucky to be living these times, because we will see more advances in the knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. Then there is a question about whether there are some sacred objects that are held in museums. No?
That is a very interesting question, and also polemic, because yes, you will say that there is, and it has been also as I explained, the objects they don't have like a meaning that is universal and routine the same. So we always resignify the things and the objects. And one example is that is very famous is the penacho of Moctezuma. No, mm-hmm. That first we don't know exactly if it's Moctezuma or not, but thinking that it is, it has been very polemic, and there are movement of different people that really want the object back to Mexico. Unfortunately, or fortunately, as has been explained by the authorities of Austria, the problem is if you move, the object will be destroyed, and we don't want that. No, so it's better that it's been preserved, I think, in Austria than go to Mexico in pieces. But it's almost like a sacred object for some groups of nationalistic Mexicans that consider like part of the identity that has been stolen. So it's a resignification because we don't even know that it was really it's very unlikely that was the penacho from Moctezuma itself, like the one that he used, because it's different to the kind of headdress that he will use. But it's all the resignification of the object.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, and then there is a question about the very difficult topic of sacrifice, no, and the attempts that are being made to re-signify what that meant, no, among the different cultures. We don't have very much time, but if you could comment briefly on this.
Yeah, I don't deny that, and I will never deny, based on the archaeological evidence, including the bones that have been found, the material rest and the iconography, that it was a practice of offer human beings to the gods that we call sacrifice. We could use sacrifice in the way that it's like killing or destroying an offering to make it sacred and give it to the gods. That is okay. But what I agree with the persons that are questioning the topic is that it has been used as a pejorative. So even though the practice is real and we cannot deny that it was an offering of humans, if you don't want to call it sacrifice, or a sacrifice of not just humans, animals, and etc., not like in the numbers that it has been said. What I think is important, and more now that is this decolonizing movement in our disciplines, is maybe think a term that is not political orientated. And that is the part that I think that is possible. Meanwhile, we find a new terminology to define this offering of persons or animals and the destruction of their lives. Maybe I think that we could use sacrifice, but always make the awareness that is a very political term, that it hurts some of the Native Americans nowadays. They don't feel comfortable with that. No? So.
Excellent. And finally, can you recommend museums in the United States, in Mexico, in the UK?
Well, in Mexico, obviously, yes, I recommend a lot the Museo Nacional de Antropología y Historia, the National Museum of Anthropology, not the Historia, the Museo Nacional de Antropología, National Museum of Anthropology, and also the Templo Mayor. Or we have the different museums in the Maya area, museums of sites. And in Britain, well, obviously the most marvelous, I think, that I really appreciate their collection is the British Museum, but also in Liverpool, in the Museum of the World, is the Codex Borgia. So I think it's worth a visit. And well, in the United States as well, is also the many beautiful different museums that depends on which art are you particularly interested. You will have different collections. The Dumbarton Oaks collection is one of the most interesting.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, there are many congratulations that have been typed in the chat box.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Angelica. Thank you to all who have attended, whether here or in the social networks. The talk will remain there. And please go have a look at the UK Mexican Art Society website, or if you're in London and you can walk past, you can see the exhibit of Mexican photography, El Instante Luminoso, of Mexican artists. It's outside, so the COVID restrictions apply. Well, we look forward to hearing you again on the next talk. Angelica, thank you very much indeed. And well, have a good rest of your day.